This week on Christian World News, troubling news for India's Christian community. A Hindu nationalist party wins 5 more years of power. Persecution has already increased under its rule. How much worse will it get?
Plus, crisis in East Africa. Hundreds of thousands at risk of starvation. And for young women in this region, the horrific abuse suffered at the hands of family. What the church is doing to stop it.
And a mission of mercy turns into a fight of life and death. This Christian doctor, shot and bleeding, sends a message to his family. Everyone, welcome to this week's edition of Christian World News. I'm George Thomas.
And I'm Wendy Griffith. India's Hindu-led BJP party secured a massive landslide victory in national elections this week. Incumbent Prime Minister Narendra Modi won a second term in office following a marathon election in the world's largest democracy. Official data also showed Modi's party winning 303 of the 542 seats in Parliament, up from 282 it had won 5 years ago. Christians and other religious minorities who have suffered intense levels of persecution under Modi's first 5 years in office fear the next 5 years could bring even more hardships.
Joining me now is Jeff King, president of International Christian Concern. Jeff, great to have you back on the broadcast. So why is India embracing this Hindu nationalist party?
Well, it's a great question, George. I think there's a couple factors. If you look around the world, there's a drift towards strong men in the world. You see it in India and China and Egypt and different places. The other thing, though, I think really specific to India is that there's a perceived threat of Islam. And Pakistan, it looked like the election was going to be a little closer. There was a suicide bombing in Kashmir, but you can't even point to that. It's a much broader move. So there's the reaction to Islam, and it's a reaction to Christianity, too. You know, Christians are seen as the prime converters of Hindus. So it's a very much a turn towards nationalism.
Since the BJP came to power 5 years ago, Jeff, persecution, as you know, against Christians has increased. How bad has it been?
It's bad. You know, we do our own internal surveys. We're monitoring the news and the attacks every day. I don't have the stats in front of me, but it's a very, very strong increase. It happened right after Modi gained power. And that's not by accident, George, as you know. The BJP and Modi are radical Hindus. There's a lot of hate speech towards Christians coming out from the party. And then Modi's big job is just to be silent after attacks on Christians. And this signals his radical followers that they have impunity. There will be no consequences. So very strong increase, totally correlated with the BJP and with Modi. It's now going to get worse.
And they won a landslide. This was a massive victory for them. They gained seats, as my colleague Wendy mentioned, in the House of Parliament, in the Lok Sabha, as they call it. Yeah. Do you expect it will get worse for Christians in the next 5 years?
I very much do, George. You know, there's a couple things that are really worrisome. So first of all, the bread and butter of persecution is going to continue, and it's going to increase. That's attacks on Christians. That's attacks on churches, on pastors, radical, violent closings of churches. But here's something even more frightening, that, you know, the word on the street, and this isn't even the word on the street, some of it's coming from the BJP, is that they will say, hey, listen, we have a mandate, and they're going to use that to push the country to change the Constitution and move it away from secularism and make it Hindu, primarily Hindu. And that's going to be a disaster.
We have last 30 seconds here. How is the church reacting to this election, and how can we pray for them?
Well, we need to pray for our brothers and sisters. They are reacting with sadness. It's not absolute surprise. I think we all knew Modi was going to win in the recent weeks. I'm not sure how many people thought it was going to be this big of a landslide. But we need to pray, and we need to get the gospel out. This is, in the end, it's a spiritual war. And people in India need the gospel, and the persecuted need protection.
Okay, Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the show. Jeff King with International Christian Concern. Appreciate your insights, sir.
Bless you.
Wendy.
The growing tension in the Middle East is highlighting the Iranian regime's abuses of human rights, particularly the persecution of Christians and other religious minorities. In Washington, D.C., human rights experts, religious freedom advocates, and politicians came together to hear about Iran's escalating war against non-Muslims. Victims of Christian persecution in Iran also addressed the gathering, sharing first-hand accounts of life in the Islamic regime.
The Iranian government arrested and imprisoned us because of our evangelical Christian faith. We were threatened and indicted with execution by hanging for charges of apostasy, blasphemy, and promoting Christianity in Iran. We spent 259 days in Tehran's notorious Evin prison, where we learned why Iran is classified as among the countries where followers of Christ face the most extreme persecution.
Among those invited were Ambassador Sam Brownback, Senator Ted Cruz, and Dr. Mike Ansari, head of one of the largest satellite channels broadcasting Christian programs into Iran.
During this Islamic holy month of Ramadan, Christians around the world are praying and ministering to Muslims in their communities. However, one Anglican church in the UK stepped over the line. A Church of England vicar planned to host a Ramadan celebration at St. Matthew and St. Luke's Church in Darlington. The event included a Muslim prayer service, and church leaders even offered to cover up the cross. The Diocese of Durham put a stop to the prayer, ruling that non-Christian worship is not allowed in its churches.
Voters in Europe cast their ballots through May 26 in what some are calling the most important EU Parliament election in a generation. Citizens in all 28 European Union member states are choosing 751 seats. A new organization of Christian political parties in the election is hoping to give small parties a big voice in Brussels. It's called the European Christian Political Movement. Its founder is Johannes de Jong.
The reason that we created the European Christian Political Movement was that we could see that in the existing European political parties there was not much space for an explicit Christian profile. So Christians in Europe know that we are there, know that there are parties at national level that may seem small in your eyes, but at the European level, together as European Christian Political Movement, we can really give them a much bigger platform, and we do.
De Jong says the EU was founded by Christians and is rooted in Christian civilization.
Up next, race to save lives, the Christians bringing food to a starving population and rescuing young girls from horrific abuse.
People want to know, is there a plan and how do you find it?
CBN presents The Plan. 8 keys for understanding God's will for your life.
We're going to talk about God's plan for your life.
Is there a plan for everyone's life?
In Pat Robertson's latest teaching, you'll discover the secret to knowing and living out God's unique purpose for you.
The plan of God will be unfolded in your life in ways you couldn't believe possible.
In The Plan, Pat reveals the principles to understanding God's will so that you will be filled with peace, provision, joy, and satisfaction. Plus, see amazing stories of how others are living out their individual purpose intended by God.
God is faithful, and we did what He told us to do.
Live the life God has designed for you.
I hope that God works out a plan in you that will bring blessing, joy, peace, and happiness.
Get the plan. Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit cbn.com.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Welcome back to Christian World News. In Nigeria this week, gunmen reportedly kidnapped an evangelical pastor and 16 other Christians in an attack that also killed one person. The incident happened in the Igabi local government area in Kaduna State. Reverend Kakera Idaho and 16 members of the evangelical church Winning all were kidnapped after midnight in the early hours of Sunday. A witness said 20 to 30 armed Fulani extremists, a violent, mostly Islamic group, carried out the attack as the church was hosting a combined choir sing. The church is reported to have a large mission organization and has seen phenomenal growth, with some congregations increasing as much as 400% in recent years. The kidnappers are demanding 15 million naira. That's about 41,000 U.S. dollars. Church leaders say they can raise only 1 million. They also say they have not contacted the police because in past kidnap cases, the police have done nothing to help. Pastor Bala Ido told media, quote, "We are only praying and making efforts on our own to get them released. We believe in the power of God."
Staying on the continent of Africa, a severe drought in northern Kenya has created a food crisis, leaving hundreds of thousands of people on the brink of starvation. Relief workers are trying to get food to the people, but they can't reach everyone, as you can imagine. Several relief agencies are at work in the region, including CBN International, digging water wells. Wendy.
And CBN Chief International Correspondent Gary Lane is just back from northern Kenya, joins us more. Tell us about the relief work that's happening there.
Well, first, let me tell you about who it's going to. It's the Turkana people in Turkana County. There are about 350,000 Turkana there. This is a very desolate area. It's all desert. There's very little to eat. They have palm nuts that they showed me. That's what they're eating. So I was with a international relief organization called United Response International that partnered with Harvest of Hope Africa to bring food to these people. And as you can see, they're picking some of the grain that has fallen from the sacks out of the sand because they're that desperate for food. We're helping them sift through that. But we provided relief, I would say, in 3 distributions. About 500 people were fed. And it's much needed in that area. But we didn't feed them just food. Right. We gave them spiritual relief as well. Some of the workers there provided prayer and ministered to the people, found out what their problems were, how we can better help them, and that sort of thing. But CBN is also doing water wells there. Wow. I talked to one couple. They had walked 7 miles round trip just to get water, and then the water's dirty. So they're in much needed water wells there as well.
Wow. Well, there's another crisis happening there, the mutilation, sexually mutilated of the young girls.
Yes.
Tell us about that and what the church is doing to help.
Well, that's in the Maasai area, and the Maasai people are probably about 2% of the Kenyan population. There are 70 ethnic groups in Kenya. This is one of them. And in the Maasai tribe, they actually, when a girl becomes 12, 13, 14 years old, they do female genital mutilation. That is, the women are considered property there, and so are the daughters. They're also sold into sexual slavery. I met this girl was released because she was from a forced marriage. Her father was trying to sell her for a couple of cattle, and she didn't want to marry the man. The man was older than her father. So this is a ministry there of Maasai ladies that help rescue the girls from female genital mutilation and from forced marriage. And that happens in the Maasai tribe. But Wendy, we also helped get them to a safe place, because it's one thing to rescue them and pull them out of that situation. Right. It's also to get them to a place where they're safe. Absolutely. And you had an opportunity to catch up with Sam Childers. He's known as the machine gun preacher. Yes. What's he been doing? That was in Uganda. And Sam, we've known him for many years. He's been a friend of CBN's. He is working on a second Machine Gun Preacher movie that will be out in the next couple of years. But the interesting thing about Sam is he received $30 million for Machine Gun Preacher 1. He has not spent much of it on himself. He's put it all back into his ministry and his orphanages in Sudan and Uganda. That's a lot of money. And we hope to go back and follow up and do some stories with him. Yeah, good for him. Yes. All right, thanks for the update. Thank you, Wendy.
Coming up, the missionary doctor who went to Haiti to save lives, attacked by mobs. One man struggling for life in the backseat of his car records a message to his wife and kids. That story when we come back.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
I think as a father, it's my job, to lead, just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Woohoo! Hi, Superbook fans. Here's something else you'll love. It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh, no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! Whoa!
No super balls, man.
Come.
Sorry, pardon me. Sorry, excuse me. Ouch!
Are you getting this?
Earn super points to win daily prizes, too. And so much more! Time to get back to my adventures. See you soon. It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
How can you find God's plan for your life?
CBN presents The Plan, 8 Keys to Understanding God's Will for Your Life. In Pat Robertson's latest teaching, you'll discover the steps to take in following God's plan, how to know for certain when God is leading you, how to get rid of spiritual blindness and see God work.
God said, I've got a plan to give you a future and a hope.
Get The Plan. Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit cbn.com.
As the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere, Haiti is in desperate need of help. Recent violence there, however, has increased the risk for aid groups working in the island country.
Riders even ambushed one group on a mission trip recently, and as Chuck Holton tells us, they're thanking God for a miraculous escape.
As Venezuela's economy has plummeted, some neighboring countries are feeling the pain as well. A sweetheart deal on petroleum between Venezuela and Haiti ended last July, which led to a 50% hike in the price of fuel. Haitians took to the streets, burning tires and blocking roads. In the following months, more than 70 protesters died in the riots. Amid all this strife is a rising tide of gang violence, turning some parts of Haiti into no-go zones, even for the police. This group of Christian missionaries arrived in April with computers and supplies for a community center they're helping to build. Shortly after leaving the airport in Port-au-Prince, things went terribly wrong.
About 4 hours or 3.5 hours outside of Port-au-Prince, came upon a gang of people that were stopping the traffic. We were the first ones to hit it because we were the only ones there. I've been there 100, 200 times. I've never had any major problems. So it's not a normal thing that happened. This is a very rare thing that we've never encountered before.
What concerned the missionaries most was that many in the crowd were armed.
The truck was just totally swarmed with men with guns and weapons, and they were pounding on the windows, trying to break all the windows to get in. And then they were on the hood, and then they were up on the top trying to get our luggage. There's one man standing there with his gun, and he has 2 white lines down his cheek and to his chin, and it reminded me of voodoo.
We came around a corner, and all of a sudden, here the road's blocked off, there's burning tires, there's debris, there's this mass crowd of 100, 120 people there, well armed with guns, and as we started approaching, they started firing these guns up in the air. And I'll be perfectly truthful, at that moment, I thought, we're gonna die.
Drew Passler was driving the second vehicle along with the team doctor, Doug Burbella.
And as we were approaching, he said, slow down a little bit.
So I'm kind of, cautiously approaching as I'm watching these people start pouring in from the sides of the road, swarming the vehicle in front of me. It was when I saw, a rifle come around the side, we thought that they were going to execute everybody. So we started reversing, and Doug's yelling, go, go, go. And as I'm going, that's when we started hearing the guns fire that were being pointed at us.
With their vehicle disabled by the gunfire, bandits quickly overtook the truck.
And I could see that there was a motorcycle next to us, and they had a machine gun, and the window blew out behind my head. And a couple seconds after that, I heard Doug yell, I'm dying. I've been hit.
As the gang emptied both vehicles, the situation continued to deteriorate.
And that's when I first looked back to see his face covered in blood, and I could see that he had 2 visible wounds and possibly more, just based on the amount of blood that I saw.
Then the gunman put his rifle up to Dr. Burbella's head. But before he could pull the trigger, something extraordinary happened.
Maybe 30 seconds later, after they'd taken my cell phone, I could see that they had my bag out of the truck. A man on a motorcycle just pulled out of nowhere in front of me. And he looked at me and he said, it's okay. It's going to be okay. And he said this, which was bizarre, in perfect English with no accent. Not even yelling, just kind of normal talking voice. He just said something in Creole in 2 to 3 words. And everybody around us that had the guns just kind of stopped.
Everything changed. The whole demeanor of the crowd just stood back. I don't know what they saw, but they stepped back, and the tension was gone.
But the crisis wasn't over. Doug Burbella was slowly bleeding to death.
Doug had so much blood on him, we thought that he had been lung shot through the vitals, but we couldn't do anything because he physically couldn't move. And during the course of the trip back, Doug was fading in and out, and at one point in time he said, look, I'm not going to make it. Would somebody please record my last words?
I just want you to know I love you, and I love you, Michael. Michael, I want you to be a pilot. Don't ever give up that dream. Live for the Lord.
When Doug finally left Haiti on the Life Flight aircraft, they brought him here to Delray Medical Center in Delray Beach, Florida. The doctors and surgeons who worked on him since then, removing the bullets and bullet fragments from his neck and face, say that the fact that he's still alive is nothing short of a miracle.
I didn't say much, but I just felt I had to say something.
Doug wants people to learn from his ordeal.
I want people to know that if God can carry me through this with no loss of any function, really, whatever problems you have, they're equally minuscule. It's a miracle, and if God can do this in this tragic of an event, I think it's a shout out to say, hey, your problem is also equally as small, and God can carry you through it.
From Delray Beach, Florida, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Man, I was just on the edge of my seat watching that interview. I mean, I wonder if the terrorists or the gang, the mob saw an angel.
I think so. I mean, it just suddenly diffused, which was incredible.
Yeah, incredible. Wow. Well, since Chuck visited him, Dr. Burbella has been released from the hospital and is expected to make a full recovery. He plans to return to Haiti as soon as possible.
I'm not surprised. All of these guys, one of those folks has been there 200 times, so hats off to you guys. Yeah.
Wow.
We'll be back right after this. Sorry.
As the world watches from the outside,
it's a big diplomatic tug-of-war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline, Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
Meet the pastors who are preaching the gospel in a fresh, fearless way. I'm Roberto Torres-Cedillo. Join me each week for Next Gen Voices. And watch God transform a generation.
Welcome back. Well, this month, the Jerusalem studio of Daystar, one of the largest Christian networks in the world, was firebombed. Did you know that?
Yeah, I did. As my colleague Chris Mitchell reports, the attack destroyed its new studio, but the network, well, they plan to rebuild.
The fire began early Saturday morning when an arsonist started a fire in the Daystar studio. Daystar was in the midst of a major renovation and upgrade of its studio here in Jerusalem, overlooking Mount Zion and the Temple Mount. The fire destroyed the new work and much of the existing facility.
The control room is, I'd say, probably totally devastated.
Dave Charette, the general contractor overseeing the renovations, showed us the destruction.
This is where we filmed from. There were 4 cameras that would be back in this area here, and Marcus and Joni would be, or their interviewee would be sitting here, and then you have this fabulous view behind them.
Yeah. These before and after shots reveal the extent of the devastation.
We're here in the new Daystar TV studios in Jerusalem, Israel.
Marcus and Joni Lamb dedicated the Daystar Jerusalem studio in March of 2011. Daystar is one of the largest Christian television networks in the world that reaches more than 200 countries and nearly 700 million people with its programs. Daystar was in the home stretch of its Jerusalem construction.
We just started with the construction of it, putting things back, getting the electric in place, and getting the walls built, and so we can meet our June 1st deadline, and then this happened.
Even in the midst of the destruction, Charette believes God is at work.
I believe that God has a reason and a purpose, and at the very least, He'll redeem what has happened here. So these ashes will be raised up, and proclaim the glory of God.
Daystar pledges to continue their Jerusalem operations and asks for prayer for continued protection. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Let's continue to pray for them.
Thank God nobody was hurt.
Yeah. Folks, that is it for this week's edition of Christian World News.
Until next week, from all of us here, goodbye and God bless you.